Hey guys, welcome back to another episode here on This Is Just the Beginning. I hope you're well and I hope you had a really good bank holiday if you're from the UK. I'm going to start this week's episode with a recap because I feel like I've not given one in a very long time. I feel like the first piece of news I should give is that I have a boyfriend now, and I think I've spoken about him bits and pieces in the past. But yeah, over the last few months we've developed a relationship and it's the most exciting feeling ever. And that's kind of the topic I want to get into. Kind of linked into this episode if you've noticed the title of embracing your vulnerability and allowing yourself to be vulnerable with yourself and with other people. But I'm not going to get into that straight away if we just do a little recap first. So because I live at home with my parents, it's a bit awkward when, you've just started dating a guy and you want to, invite him back to your house, but then you realise you live with your parents because he still lives at uni. So I've been staying at his house more or less over the last few months. Last week I was dog sitting, as I said, and wow, it was the most amazing week. And I've not even done a podcast since then. So yeah, dog sitting was the most amazing week. And I've learned so much about myself through that week and being alone again for a week, living on my own. I've not done that for over a year now since dropping out of university. So it was kind of an eye-opener again to say that, like a little test, I can still do it. But Dan came over for that weekend and helped me look after the little dog, a King Charles Spaniel, the cutest dog ever. She's a small dog. If you know what a King Charles Spaniel Cavalier, I never know if it's a Cavalier or a Spaniel, but anyway, she's a small dog. And I'd come back from work when I was in the office, or I'd come back from a run, wherever I went, even if I was gone for 10 minutes to the shop or wherever I was, I would bend down this tiniest bit. And bearing in mind, I'm 5'2" as well, but compared to a little dog, that's pretty tall anyway. But I'm a small person. But I'd bend down a little bit and she'd jump up, hook her front arms, paws, legs, whatever, around my neck. I don't know how she'd reach that, and just literally want me just to hug her. She didn't want to be picked up, she didn't want kisses, she just wanted to be hugged all the time. She'd sit on my lap while I was eating dinner at the table, and my lap is quite small. I don't know how she fit on that, because she's a small dog with a bit of a belly, and it was just the cutest thing for the whole week. I loved it. But yeah, and so Dan came over for the weekend. We stayed, we had a really lovely kind of weekend in Worcester, and he's never really been to Worcester, I don't think, so it was nice for him to come over to my ends rather than me travelling to Birmingham to see him, which is only a half-hour train, but you know what I mean. But then this weekend was bank holiday, and me and my sister, because the whole family was back for a few days, not to do Easter, we don't really do Easter, but a bank holiday, ends up being a bit of a messy weekend, if I say the least. But Dan was meant to meet us in Birmingham, me, Lani and her boyfriend, so that they can meet him, because my parents met him last weekend. We met them for a drink. So we already met my parents, but he hadn't met my sister. And I've told you before, I have a twin sister. We are best friends. The guy does not need approval from my dad, he needs it from my sister. So, and from my last boyfriend, it needs a lot of approval. You know what I mean? Because that one went tits up, basically. But Lani and her boyfriend didn't get home in time because they were travelling up from Bath because they're at uni there. And obviously Friday bank holiday traffic, they were stuck, so we missed our train. So I called him saying, any chance you want to come over here? And he was like, isn't all of your family around there? And I was like, yeah, will that make you comfortable? After a lot of back and forth, because I know that if it was the other way around, I'd be a bit hesitant to come. But I was like, you've met my parents, my sister, everyone else is our age. We're all 20 odd years old, you know what I mean? My brother and his girlfriend were here too. We're all kids. So it'll be really chill. It's not like you're meeting, uncles, grandparents, whatever. It's just us lot. So he was like, okay. He got a train over. His train was cancelled, so I had to get him from basically halfway between Birmingham and Worcester, so I may as well have just picked him up basically. But I picked him up and we stayed over Friday night and we had the loveliest evening, just all of the family together. We don't do that for quite a few months at a time actually, because my sister's still at uni, my brother's moved out to London with his girlfriend, so we don't really get to see each other all that often, especially when we're all there. Obviously I'm always here with my parents, so I might see one or the other, and I always see my sister, as I've said, every other weekend I go to Bath. If I'm not back at uni or with Dan or wherever I am, I'm always away. So we ended up having a really nice night, and then because Dan sold his car a few months ago, which is really annoying, but so he was getting trains everywhere, and he lives over in Leicester, which is the East Midlands, so about an hour and a half drive away. And he was going home to see his family for Easter, and he said to me, do you want to come back home with me to meet my family? And this was not just his parents, he's got loads of older siblings as well, so all of his older siblings and their kids. And I was like, oh dear. But he just really wanted a lift home, basically, is what he was trying to tell me. But I was like, okay, so you've met my family, I may as well go meet yours. So then I ended up spending the whole of Easter with his family. Best weekend ever. It was the most amazing weekend, and I just loved it so much. But then it kind of went downhill. And if you know anything about me, you will know that my social battery is very short. Even when I'm with someone I love, or someone, like my sister that I'm really close to. I mean, I think my sister is the only one that I can spend unlimited time with, I think. Because, like with the same person, she's a bit different. Like, she needs time, like, away from me. But she's the only one that I can just spend, like, time with all the time. But anyone else, even if, they're my boyfriend or my mum, you know what I mean? I need to, like, have time away from them. And I'd been with Dan since Friday, and Sunday night I had a little bit of a breakdown with him because that was the first time I realised how vulnerable I was. And I don't know if I have mentioned this recently. I think I might have mentioned it in a previous episode, but I just suddenly felt, when you let your guard down around someone, especially if you've had problem with doing that in the past, everything came crashing down on me. And obviously I didn't want to end the weekend on a really bad note, because we honestly had the best weekend ever. And that was definitely in my top 5 weekends of my whole life, probably top 3, maybe even my favourite. But I just had this huge meltdown at 1 a.m. in the morning, just crying. And it's not like I was drunk or anything. I was just very emotional. And I thought it was hormones, but no, it was genuinely because I was really confused with my emotions. Like, I was so happy, I was having a great time, and I explained this to him. But then I also explained how I didn't want to let my guard down, but obviously that breakdown was me letting that guard down completely. And it was the most, I don't know how to explain it, the scariest yet kind of exciting feeling ever. Like, I was really happy and really proud of myself that I could do that in front of him, I could break down. But then I was so scared by it because I didn't want him to see that and then kind of run away from it. Again, that's kind of the self-sabotaging thinking, the negative thoughts, thinking like, oh, he's going to get scared of me if I break down in front of him. He'll see the emotional side of me, the kind of unstable side of me. And then he reminded me that everyone has mental health issues, trauma, past experiences with people, like everyone has that kind of thing. And that he promised me that he wouldn't run away from it because, he likes me for me. I don't need to pretend to be around him. You know what I mean? I can be who I want authentically. And I did an episode on authenticity. I think that was my last episode. And it's kind of the same kind of thing here. That you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable and let your guard down from time to time. I know a lot of people say when you come out of like a bad relationship or a really dark point in your life, and then you come out really strong, and then you always say, I'm not going to let anyone in my life to ruin me again, and I'm so strong and independent, and I'm on my own at the moment. You can't do that for the rest of your life. And I thought I could put this front up and act all happy and cheery around people and then go home and cry. And although that's just a coping mechanism, like it does help, you know what I mean? You never want to bring the mood down when you promised your friends you're going to go on a night out on a Saturday, and then you're in a really bad mood and all you want to do is just talk to them with a pizza and maybe a bottle of wine at home, and you don't want to go out. But then you think, no, we don't see each other, you have to have this social time, it will make you feel better if you go. And then obviously if you tell them as well, they're like, okay, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Tonight, let's just have a really good night to get your mind off it. And I'm always in two minds about that. Like, sometimes I'm like, okay, sure, yeah, let's have a really good night. Let's just get drunk, let's dance, let's just have fun. Talk about it tomorrow, a debrief. Hungover debrief is always fun. But then I am that person that if I'm already really emotional before I go out, drinking just makes it even worse. And then I end up like crying my eyes out in the middle of a club. And I've done that way many times than I care to admit, basically. And what I'm trying to say here is that you can't be strong all the time. Even if you think it's for a good reason, if you don't want to bring the mood down, for example, at some point you are going to break. And that breaking point is the hardest thing ever. And I'm definitely sure we've all been there, where we try to bottle it up, we've tried to get through it on our own. And then you're faced with this situation, maybe one more thing has toppled you over the edge and you break down. And maybe it's something as simple as someone's cancelled plans on you. Or I know you're with your boyfriend and he says, sorry, I won't be able to meet you next weekend. Or, I can't meet up with you when we said I can't do that date night, as an example. Then you just start crying. And we've definitely all been there. I know you've been there. We just start crying. Maybe not over this example, but something very similar as well. Maybe your mum says that she's not making your favourite dinner tonight, that she promised, because she forgot to go shopping, for example. And you start crying. And then the other person thinks it's their fault, especially if you're in a relationship. That is always the kind of their kind of reasoning behind it, and vice versa as well. You always think it's your fault, and it can cause an argument. It can cause a lot of tension. In that situation, the best thing I'd say is to say straight away, no, this is not your fault, and let your guard down. and completely let your guard down from the start. Otherwise, it's not going to go the way you want it to go. There is zero point trying to be strong in that situation. You have to let it go. You have to just let everything out. And then that other person should then realise that you're not crying over cancelled plans or cancelled dinner plans. You're literally crying because everything has bottled up to this point. And as soon as you say that, obviously it's scary. I know it's scary, but this is all about being vulnerable, and you've got to do it. Otherwise, that person could easily walk out of your life because you've got upset that they've cancelled one little plan with you. You know, I mean, it's annoying when people cancel anyway, but if you have a huge breakdown over it, which I do a lot anyway, but you know what I mean, it's not the best impression to leave on someone. But then again, equally, that's okay to do. As I say, I always say your feelings are completely valid, especially as women. Like, we cry all the time. Or I feel like you either cry loads or you don't cry at all. I am the former. I cry a lot. If you haven't noticed, I cry over any minor convenience, but that is literally because I don't get my emotions out quick enough, and I do bottle it up because I never know. I'm still trying to learn like triggers and realize what my emotions are and what I'm feeling. Like, that is still a work in progress for me. So when I am faced with a situation where someone does say something negative or something that I don't want to hear, like maybe my boyfriend does cancel on a plan or makes a joke at me that's, you know, a bit of banter, but it hits me in a different way than usual, even though we banter together all the time. But sometimes, you know, when you just are not in the mood for it, they don't realise you get upset, they think it's their fault, or they think you're overreacting, and you're not. But that is the point, as I've just said. You have to tell them why you're upset. And maybe, yeah, you'll be like, oh, that's kind of pissed me off, but then also say, but no, it's not really that, it's all of this stuff. And then if they're that good of a person, which I hope they are, they will help you through it. I think the idea of letting your walls down with someone new is so scary if you've, in the past, I dealt with someone who doesn't allow you to let your walls down, or, you know, like, you're scared to do it around them, or they shut you down as soon as you do that with them, or they turn it around on you, or if it's something really negative. Trust me, I've been there, and it is horrible. It's so scary to do that again because you just think the next person's going to do the same thing. And this can be in friendships, in relationships, in, you know, colleagues with work, or your boss, or whoever it is, wherever you have a relationship with someone, romantic or not. It can be so hard to allow yourself to do that again because you've been shut down in the past. And I've been there, trust me, you know I've been there, I've told you about this. And it is the hardest thing probably you'll ever do. But then it's the proudest thing you'll ever do as soon as you do it. And that feeling of relief that you've finally been able to let your walls down. Maybe it's taken you years, or maybe not, it's taken you months, but you thought you'd never be able to be in that stage again. Maybe you've not had a new relationship for years, and it's taken you so hard to allow anyone in your life, friends, family, romantic relationships, has taken you that long to get someone into your life, and now you've finally done it. That is so exciting, and you can agree with me there, I'm sure. So I want to do a journal prompt here with you. Get a pen and paper, or think, or if you're on a drive, say it out loud, pause here, whatever you want to do. Think about the worst that could happen in that situation. If you are currently struggling with letting your walls down, saying everything that you're feeling, or, you know, you feel scared to do that, or you feel like you don't have permission to do that, write down the worst that could happen if you do it. Okay, and this is an exercise for especially those who have struggled with it in the past, or you're struggling with this now, whatever it is. Maybe you've got some trauma with that, or you've just had a really shitty ex like me, you know, who kind of silenced you a little bit without knowing, or maybe it was for a good reason, whatever it is, whatever you've been through. Or maybe it's been instilled in your mind that you don't have a voice by society, by friends or parents or teachers, whoever it is that has made you feel this way. Think to yourself, okay, what's the worst that could happen? And honestly, the worst that could happen maybe is that they do shout at you, and they do the same behaviours that the last person did. And then I ask you, please, in that situation, walk out and leave. I don't care if it's your boyfriend, your wife, like your husband, whoever it is, whoever's that so close to you. If someone does that to you again, get up and leave. Maybe not so dramatically, but maybe say to them again with the assertive communication, saying, I do not like how this is making me feel. I feel uncomfortable. I'm going to remove myself from the situation. And if they get arsy about it, if they don't like what you're doing, that is their problem. That is not your problem. I want you to have that kind of strong mentality and saying, I'm not having this. I'm just going to get up and leave. Maybe that's for 10 minutes. Maybe that's for the rest of your life. You don't see them again. I hope it's not the latter. You know, I hope you kind of cool off and then think, go back in and say, okay, maybe that was a bit of an overreaction, but I cannot be in this negative position with you. That was scary for me. And explain why that's scary for you. And maybe if you moving on from the journal prompt now. Maybe if you are in that position where you feel like it's time to let your guard down, maybe you're trying to start a new relationship with someone and they're finding it really hard to break through to you and there's just something missing, and that probably is the fully open, honest communication. Maybe start by saying to them, not like, hey, can we have a chat? Because we all know how that sentence goes, you know? We all know where that leads, but maybe just start by saying, I really want to talk to you about something that is really personal and I don't think I'm ready to talk about it yet, but I want to talk about it. Something like that, and try and get them ready for something that has nothing to do with them. Make sure they know that. Make sure you know, again, assertive communication. Make sure they know that this is a you thing, okay? Not saying that is a bad thing. Please don't think it is. We are all been in that position where, and I feel like a lot of people struggle with that with new friends, where they feel like they can't tell them everything. Maybe you've had problems in the past where a friend isn't happy for your success, so you don't ever share good news or even bad news with your new friends, maybe at university. But tell this new person in your life that you really want to be open with them, but you're finding it hard to. And you want to let your walls down, but you're finding it hard to. And maybe you are at the position where you feel like you can, but it's going to take a while. Say to them that you just need patience. You need them to be patient with you. You need them to give you some space, and you know, this conversation might take a while, but you want to tell them everything. You want them to see you for like authentically you and to see into your life. And I always feel like you connect so much better with people as soon as you've had this really open, raw, emotional chat. Because even though I always say, oh, men aren't as emotionally intelligent as us, sure, that is true. Literally, genetically, whatever it is, that is true. But I'm learning more and more about the guys I speak to, whether that is romantically or friends or older men in general. The ones I'm speaking to, like my boyfriend now, for example, does have a really high emotional intelligence, and I don't know if that's him just like being a good boyfriend, if you know what I mean, by listening to someone that is a good trait to have in a relationship. I don't know whether it's that or I hope he just has he's really clued up with this kind of thing, and he has had toxic exes in the past, and it's a really good thing that we can have this conversation, and I'm really happy to be with him basically because my ex didn't have that. And as soon as I started trying to use assertive communication, or I tried to explain to him that I was feeling pressured or if I was just having a really bad day, he would always somehow turn that around on me and make me the bad guy, even though nothing might have happened, you know what I mean? And I've just had a bad day, I want to speak to him. And without speaking too much about him, but he'd always turn it around back on me that it was somehow my fault, or he'd say, this has nothing to do with me, I've done nothing wrong, or be defensive and say that, yeah, like, it's not my fault that you had a bad day, stuff like that. And that made me feel really silenced by him and thought that I couldn't speak to him, even though those very, very few occasions where we did have a really deep chat, they were helpful, but then he'd always give me the really harsh truth that I didn't want to hear and I didn't need to hear. I wanted someone to protect me and love me for who I was, not put me down when I needed someone to kind of pick me back up. And yeah, sure, coddling isn't always the best thing, but for me it is. I need that before the harsh truth, you know? Now I kind of wanted to talk to you about what you think of vulnerability. And this can be another journal exercise if you want to, or whether just listen to what I kind of have to say about this. But you think the word vulnerability, it has such negative connotations. And yeah, it is a negative word, and it's not a positive word. It's not something you want to strive to be. You don't want to be vulnerable. You want to be strong and confident. Vulnerable isn't strong or confident, you think. But in fact, it actually is those things, you know. It takes so much confidence, so much strength, you know, those two traits that you want to be. It takes so much of that to be vulnerable. And being vulnerable isn't just about being weak, and, you know, it's not a weakness, it's not a flaw. It is about being strong enough and trusting. Again, trust, especially when we're talking about relationships. Trust is a huge thing, and communication. It takes both of those things to be vulnerable around someone. And I was saying this to Dan, and he said to me, as soon as I was breaking down on Sunday night, he said to me, this just shows me how much you love me. This shows me that, you know, you want me in your life. You want me to help, even though it's a bit of an annoying way to show it. He didn't quite say that. He was more lovey than that. But he was just saying how he was really proud of me, and that this is what we need in this relationship. We need that breakdown, and we need that kind of time to see, okay, this is who you are. You need a hug right now. You're in a vulnerable position, and that's totally okay. And it is all about having this strength to break down. And I know that kind of sounds like an oxymoron, or however you want to put it, and it's not something you want to do, but you need to do in order to jump that next level of your relationship and have a really strong foundation to work with. I'm not saying it's easy. God, am I saying it's easy? Bloody hell no. It is probably the hardest thing you'll do in terms of personal growth, by allowing someone back into your life. Not back into your life, but allowing another person into your life. And it's really hard to do that. And I mean, by saying back into your life, maybe you are talking to an ex who did put you down a little bit, or you just had experience in the past, and you might be speaking to an ex-best friend or an ex in itself, and you're thinking, I do want to let them back into my life, but not in that way. And it takes so much strength to listen to what your heart wants, but then what your head wants. And it is a mess most of the time, all this journey, but at the end of the day, you really learn more about yourself. I learned loads about myself during that breakdown, even though it was more of like a cry for help than anything, to tell him, I'm actually not okay. I'm not the confident, fun person that you always know. Because Sunday afternoon, like, I am a very confident, fun person, especially in a relationship, especially at the start of a relationship. I'm so giddy, I'm so excited, I'm so happy all the time. But then that does wear off, you know? I'm not saying for the whole relationship, but it wears off a little bit because the excitement's over. I mean, it's not, don't get me wrong. I'm in a great position right now with him, and I'm just so excited for the future. And that's the first time I've ever felt like this. And he knows this. So if you are listening, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But it does take that kind of, and then I broke down and I was vulnerable, because it was a cry for help by saying, I'm not always going to be this fun person. And he said to me, like, when I wasn't quite my usual self Sunday afternoon, he was like, what's wrong? Like, you're usually really happy. And I was like, yeah, I've just got a lot on my mind. And then because I didn't tell him in that moment in time when I was calm, I then broke down in tears and was sobbing to him about it, which again is not what I wanted to do at all. But that's the way it came out, and that is okay as well. Whatever way you do it, it's totally okay if you cry or if you don't cry. Even if you think, maybe I should be crying here, maybe that makes it sound more extreme. You know, those are also things that we think about as well. Whatever way it comes out, and this can be anything you say, even a breakup. Even if you think you should be crying when you're breaking up with someone, I did, even though I probably shouldn't have. Like, I didn't really feel much emotion during it, you know, but I felt like I needed to cry. And that was more of a relief than a sad cry, to be honest. Looking back now, I thought it was sad. Not for me. It was probably the best decision I ever made in my life, because look at me now. But anyway, and, you know, like, you have all these emotions when you do things. But for example, like, as I was saying, like, breaking up with someone, if you don't want to cry, don't feel like you have to cry. You know, if someone is like, why aren't you crying about this? Or same with grief, same with, I don't know, someone didn't invite you to a party, whatever it is where you think you should cry and you don't cry, that's not a failure, and vice versa. Like, cry when you want to damn cry. That's the advice I'll give you in this episode. So what I'm basically saying here is that being vulnerable, all this vulnerability talk, is not a flaw. It is not a weakness. If anything, it makes you stronger and your relationship stronger. If you can be vulnerable, whether that is even online, maybe you have your own podcast like me, maybe you have your own social media, or maybe you don't have a big following, maybe you've just got a personal account, but you want to get your story out there, or you want to, if you have a bigger following, maybe you want to tell your followers how you're really feeling. Social media has this huge fake presence, and sometimes breaking down online, showing a video of you crying, or not even crying, just posting something saying, hey, I'm not going to be myself this week, this has happened, or I'm just going to take a break from social media, whatever it is, that is scary to do because you're vulnerable and you don't want to do that. Obviously, that's the last thing you want to do, especially if you're growing your social media or you have a big following and you want to keep your followers, that kind of thing. But being vulnerable is such a powerful tool because it allows you to think, okay, I've just told this person, these people, whatever, I've just got that out in the world. And it's a huge relief as soon as you let that out there. And I'm sure you've had those feelings before where everything's so built up and then you finally tell someone, whatever it is you're feeling, and whoever it is you tell, you finally tell someone and you just feel so much relief. You might not feel any better mentally, but you do have this sense of relief in you that that weight is finally off of your shoulders. But then another thing which I've spoken about a lot is being a burden on others. And that is a completely different topic. I mean, it's not actually, I think I might talk about this a little bit here, but this is what I was saying to my boyfriend. I was saying how I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to put all of my stuff onto him. And he was saying, this is a 50-50 relationship. Don't feel like you can't tell me things. when I'm struggling, I'll want to tell you things, and I'd hope that you'd listen to me and kind of take it on with me. And I said, well, yeah, obviously I'd want to do that, but I have a lot of baggage, and I don't want to be that girl. I don't want to be like your ex, because I know his ex had a lot of emotional baggage as well. I was like, I don't want to be that person. And then he reminded me of a recent post I did by saying stuff about how we've all gone through things. We all have issues. We all have baggage. There's not one person in this world that doesn't. And for someone to say, oh, I'm a burden, I've got so much going on, I've got so many issues, that kind of invalidates other people's issues. I know we all have like different levels of extremity? Yeah. We all have these different levels of what we've been through, and some are worse than others, blah, blah, blah. But again, all feelings are valid. We've all been through some level of shit in our life. And if that shit is to some person barely anything or really bad, it doesn't matter. Because to you, that is the worst thing you've gone through. And I've said this a lot, and I haven't said it in a while though, so I'm saying it here. That is valid. For you saying that maybe getting a paper cut is the worst thing that's happened to you today, and someone's lost a really close family member. I don't know, those are really two different extremes, but they're both valid. I mean, a paper cut, maybe not, okay. Maybe something a bit smaller, like maybe you were late for work and your boss shouted at you. I don't know, but those feelings are valid. We can all have a bad day, whatever that bad day looks like to you. Maybe you are just an absolute emotional mess. Maybe you're on your period, you've had a bad day. Or maybe it's something even, more extreme, and it's something that you had no control over, and it's a horrible thing to go through, grief, whatever it is, okay? Sure, that is extreme. Sure, that is definitely worse off than being late for work, okay? You know that. But regardless, if someone comes over to you saying, you've not had a shit day, I've had a worse day, that is the worst thing that they can do. That means that they are jealous, insecure, whatever, Don't be that person either. Please don't be that person. Please don't invalidate people's feelings. When you were like talking to your friend about, maybe you've got like a sleepover where there's like a group of you over, and you start saying, I kind of want to speak to you about this, or you start getting upset about it, and then someone jumps in and says like, oh, but I've had an even worse day, this happened. You don't want to hear that in that moment, or ever. You never want to hear someone combat your struggles with even bigger struggles in their mind. You want someone to be there for you. So be both of those people. Be that person who is there for them, and be that person that does stand up for yourself and say, look, I know you've had a bad day too, but I want to talk about this first. Like, I've just started talking, But you are never going to be a burden on someone's life, is what I'm saying here. Like, you deserve everything good, and that person you're with right now should allow you to break down. They should allow you to be vulnerable with them, because again, that shows how strong you are and shows how much you want them in your life, because you're willing to break down everything that you've built up. Maybe you've been in such a toxic relationship before and you've built up your walls so high and you've not let anyone else in. Then this new person comes along who you want to believe is such a right fit, but then you've still got those thoughts in the back of your mind that say, oh, they're going to hurt me, or whatever it is. You're not going to be a burden to them, okay? They're going to be a nice person. Not everyone is a bad person. Just because you had a bad past does not mean you're going to have a bad future. And that is something really important to hold on here. If you had past experiences that weren't great, that does not mean your future experiences are going to be equally as bad. In fact, they're going to get better, in my opinion. I had a really toxic relationship in the past. Now I'm in a really pretty stable, exciting, fun, open, honest relationship. And I feel the best I've ever felt. I feel incredible right now because he's really helping me through it. I get the feeling that you don't want to put everything on the other person. Trust me, this is what I was explaining to him on Sunday. I was saying, you're too good for me, I'm not worth it, all of those things. That is just a lack of self-worth and self-esteem on my part. That's got nothing to do with him. And I said to him, like, he told me that, and I was like, I know this is something I need to work on. And if I'd said this a month ago, I'd say, I can't work through this with you. But now we've got this far into a relationship and I'm only just telling you this now. It means that I do trust you, and it means I do want you to work through this with me. It means I need help. And that is so strong in itself to do. You cannot do everything on your own. And he was quite surprised that I said that to him, actually, because that was the most open thing I said to him. I literally said, like, I wouldn't have spoken to you a couple months ago because I was such a mess. But now I've worked on it enough myself that I do feel like I can do it with someone else. Because it's so easy to isolate yourself in these kind of situations, and for months you can do this, and I've been there as well. But at the end of the day, we are social beings. We need people in our lives. We need people to help ground us. And that's not you being a burden at all. Because again, as I said, that other person in your life has probably got issues they want to talk about too. So with you being open with them, with your issues first, then they can get the courage to speak to you about theirs. But again, listen to them. Don't invalidate them. If they've helped you, help them back as well is another thing I'd say. So I am challenging the myth of this self-sufficiency, that thing that we see all over social media, like with people, especially in the gym. You know, when people always say, like, you can tell someone who's been in a dark place if they're in the gym with no headphones on, or they're always there for 3 hours. But you never know what's going on in someone's life. But I do agree with that. But you're seeing so much about this self-sufficiency, be on your own, you know, work on yourself on your own. You don't need anyone in your life other than you. You're strong, you're independent. And as much as I agree with all of that, it's not true. Sure, we all have those periods in our life where you do need to isolate yourself a little bit. And it does hurt. And it's a horrible feeling to do that. But maybe you've been in such a dark place and you've been trying and pretending around other people. It is worth having a month or two working on yourself, sure. But you cannot distance yourself from people for good. And it is okay to have, obviously, part of your wellness journey is to work through on your own. But then you need to build yourself up strong enough to then do it with other people, whether that is with a partner or with your family or with your friends, whoever it may be, with a teacher, with your therapist. You need to build yourself back up so that you can talk to other people about it. Otherwise, you never will, and you will be stuck in that isolated period. I think the way social media is right now and society is saying that we need to be okay on our own and don't rely on other people, you're a burden, and all these seemingly positive things, but they're actually kind of negative. They're going to taint the generation below us by thinking that, you know, having boyfriends and girlfriends is in the past and we should be dating around and we shouldn't be holding on to people, and relationships aren't as good as they used to be with all the divorce rates right now. I'm not saying any of that. I don't agree with any of that. All I'm saying is that you take the time to work on yourself and you can do it with other people. So to end this episode here, I want you to embrace your vulnerability. Like I said before, with your authenticity and being yourself completely, same thing applies here. Do it on your own, do it with other people. I don't care where you start, as long as you start. Being vulnerable is the most powerful thing you can ever do for your own self-growth and your relationship growth. So here's to that today, and I hope you're enjoying the sunnier weather. I'm going to leave it on a bit of a brighter note for you. April showers have been here, they're great, but you know, we move on. I am jetting off to Portugal tomorrow, so I'm going to be nicely tanned, and then I'm getting my hair done when I come back. So I'll be blonde and tanned for spring, basically. And that is very exciting. So I will be back next week with an episode from Portugal, perhaps with a special guest is my plan, but I will let you know about that on my socials. My socials is, my blog is over at pepetto.net. That is PEPETOE.net. And my Instagram is Pepetto by Elena, same spelling, ELENA for Elena, Pepetto by Elena. And yeah, that is all I have for you today, guys. So I'll speak to you very soon, and goodbye.